A 28-year-old method actor walked onto Clint Eastwood's set and said, "I'm here to teach you what real acting looks like." He spent 3 days disrupting every scene, lecturing the crew about authentic performance and refusing to follow Clint's direction. What Clint did in the next 48 hours didn't just end the actor's career. It became a masterclass taught in film schools for the next 20 years. It was September 2003, and the Wyoming desert was already baking at 95 degrees by 7 o'clock a.m. Clint Eastwood was directing Flags of Our Fathers, a World War II epic that would require precise choreography, massive production coordination, and absolute discipline from everyone involved. The production had 120 crew members, a $90 million budget, and a tight 65-day shooting schedule that left no room for delays or drama. Clint had built his reputation over 4 decades as a director who ran efficient professional sets. No yelling, no chaos, no tolerance for ego. His films finished on time and under budget without sacrificing quality. Actors who worked with him described his sets as calm, focused, almost meditative despite the complexity of what they were creating. Then they cast someone we'll call Marcus Thornton. Thornton was 28 years old and already considered himself a serious artist. He'd graduated from the Yale School of Drama, studied intensively with method acting coaches in New York, and had won critical acclaim for a brutal performance in an independent film about addiction. The role had required him to lose 30 pounds, live in a halfway house for 2 months, and refuse to break character during the entire shoot. Critics called it fearlessly committed. His agent called it a launching pad to stardom. When Thornton's agent pitched him for a significant supporting role in Clint's film, the casting director had reservations. She'd heard stories. Thornton had a reputation for being difficult, for prioritizing his process over production needs, for treating film sets like personal art installations rather than collaborative workplaces. "He's talented," she told Clint during a casting meeting, "but he comes with baggage, very method, very intense about his approach. He's walked off sets before when he felt directors didn't understand his process." "How many times?" Clint asked, his voice that trademark quiet rasp. 3 productions in 2 years. Always blamed creative differences, but crews said he was impossible to work with. Refused direction, stayed in character between takes, lectured other actors about technique. Clint considered this information carefully. He respected actors who took their craft seriously. He'd worked with Daniel Day-Lewis, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, actors who brought depth and preparation to their roles. But there was a difference between dedication and self-indulgence, between craft and ego disguised as artistry. "What's his work like?" Clint asked. "Objectively, powerful, raw. The kid has talent, but he thinks talent excuses behavior." Clint thought about this for a long moment, then made his decision. "Give him the part, but make it clear how we operate here. 6 a.m. call times when scheduled, professionalism, respect for crew time. If he can't handle that, better to know now." The casting director nodded, but she had a feeling this wouldn't end well. Thornton signed his contract in August and arrived on location in early September. He attended the first production meeting where Clint addressed the entire cast and crew. Clint's expectations were clear and non-negotiable. "We start on time," Clint said, standing at the front of the room with his characteristic understated authority. "When your call time is 6 a.m., that means you're ready to work at 6 a.m., not arriving at 6 a.m. The crew will be here early. The equipment will be ready. Everyone else will be prepared. I expect the same from actors." He continued, "This is a complex production. War scenes require precision timing. We have stunt coordinators, special effects teams, dozens of background actors, all working together. When one person isn't ready, everyone wait. And I don't run sets where egos disrupt work. If you have concerns about a scene or your character, talk to me. But once we're rolling, we're rolling. Understood?" The cast nodded. Everyone except Marcus Thornton, who sat in the back with his arms crossed, looking vaguely amused, as if these logistics were beneath someone of his artistic caliber. After the meeting, Thornton approached Clint with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "I appreciate your military efficiency approach," Thornton said, his tone making it clear he didn't actually appreciate it at all. "But I need you to understand that my process requires flexibility. I don't work on a schedule. Real acting, serious method work, happens when the actor is ready, not when a production coordinator decides it's convenient." Clint looked at him with those famous narrowed eyes, saying nothing for a beat. "Your call time tomorrow is 6 a.m. Clint said quietly. Be ready to work. I'm just saying, Thornton pressed, that Stanislavski didn't work on a clock, Strasberg didn't punch a time card, and neither do I. Great performances require 6 a.m., Clint interrupted, his voice still quiet but with an edge sharp enough to cut. Tomorrow. Then Clint turned and walked away, leaving Thornton standing there, clearly annoyed at being dismissed. The first day Thornton was scheduled to shoot was a Tuesday. The scene was a crucial flashback requiring perfect morning light, elaborate battlefield staging, and coordination with 50 background actors playing soldiers. The location was a remote valley 90 minutes from base camp. Everything had to be timed precisely because they had a narrow window of ideal lighting. At 6 o'clock a.m., the entire production was ready. Cameras positioned on tracks for complex moving shots, explosives rigged and tested for safety. Costume and makeup had been working since 4 o'clock a.m. 50 background actors stood in period-accurate uniforms in the rising heat. Clint was in his director's chair, reviewing the shot list, quietly conferring with his cinematographer. Marcus Thornton's trailer was dark and silent. At 6:30 a.m., the first assistant director knocked on Thornton's door. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. The crew began checking watches, whispering. This wasn't normal for a Clint Eastwood production. At 7 o'clock a.m., Thornton finally opened his trailer door. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair disheveled, holding a journal and looking genuinely annoyed at being interrupted. We're ready for you, the AD said carefully. I'm not ready, Thornton replied, as if this should be obvious. I'm still accessing the emotional landscape of the character. This scene requires deep trauma work. I need to connect with memories of loss, of fear, of brotherhood betrayed. That can't be rushed. I'll be out when I'm ready. Everyone's waiting, the AD said. The whole crew, the background actors. Then they'll wait, Thornton said, his voice sharp with irritation. I'm here to create art, not to punch a clock. Tell Clint that real acting happens on the actor's timeline, not a production schedule. He closed the door. The AD walked back to Clint and explained the situation. Clint's face revealed nothing. He simply nodded, then made a decision. Shoot around him. Move to scene 47. We'll get his coverage later if he decides to show up. The crew scrambled to reorganize for a completely different scene, losing the perfect morning light they'd specifically planned for. Background actors who'd been ready since 5:30 a.m. sat in the brutal heat, waiting. Department heads recalculated schedules, knowing they'd just lost a critical shooting window. Thornton emerged from his trailer at 8:45 a.m., finally ready to work. A full 2 hours and 45 minutes after his call time. By then, the light was wrong and they'd moved to a different location. Clint shot Thornton's scenes efficiently without comment, his face betraying no emotion, but several crew members noticed he was watching Thornton carefully, noting something. That evening, the producer approached Clint with concern. We lost 3 hours today. That's budget. That's schedule. We can't afford many days like this. I know, Clint said quietly. Should we talk to him, issue a warning? Not yet, Clint said. Let's see if today was an anomaly or a pattern. The second day Thornton was scheduled was Thursday. Another crucial dawn scene requiring the same precise coordination. Call time, 6 o'clock a.m. sharp. At 6 o'clock a.m., the crew was ready. Same massive coordination, same 50 background actors, same narrow window of perfect light. Thornton's trailer was dark. At 6:30 a.m., still dark. The crew's frustration was visible now. This wasn't an anomaly. This was becoming a pattern. At 7 a.m., the AD knocked on Thornton's door with less patience than the previous day. Thornton opened it wearing a bathrobe, drinking herbal tea from a ceramic mug, looking completely relaxed as if he were on vacation rather than on a $90 million production. I explained this 2 days ago, Thornton said, his voice carrying clear irritation, as if the AD was the problem rather than his own lateness. My artistic process requires preparation time. I'm doing deep breathing exercises, emotional memory work, physical centering. This is how Brando worked. This is how De Niro works. This is how serious actors approach serious roles. I'm not some television actor who just shows up and hits marks. We have 120 people waiting, the AD said, voice tight with controlled frustration. Then they're learning patience, Thornton replied with a smug smile. Great art can't be manufactured on an assembly line. If Clint Eastwood doesn't understand that method acting requires time and space, maybe he should direct car commercials commercials instead of serious films. He closed the door. When the AD reported this back to Clint, including the car commercial comment, the cinematographer expected an explosion, but Clint's face remained calm, almost expressionless. He simply nodded and said, "Shoot around him again." Thornton emerged at 9 o'clock a.m. Over 3 hours late, they'd lost another perfect lighting window. Clint directed him through his scenes with cold efficiency, but said nothing about the delay, nothing about the disrespect, nothing about the production chaos Thornton was causing. But that evening, Clint made a phone call, then another, then several more, to producers, studio executives, casting directors, agents, other directors, conversations that would matter very soon. The third day Thornton was scheduled was Saturday, his biggest scene, a complex emotional breakdown that required intricate choreography with other actors, elaborate camera movement following his character through a devastated battlefield, an absolutely perfect light at dawn. They'd scheduled extra crew, brought in a Steadicam operator from Los Angeles specifically for this shot, and coordinated 6 different departments around this single scene. Call time, 5:30 a.m. They needed to start early to capture the light at its most dramatic. At 5:15 a.m., the entire production was ready. Actors in full costume and prosthetic wounds, smoke machines positioned, camera department testing the complex tracking shot, sound department ready with boom operators on platforms, stunt coordinator briefed, special effects team standing by, 120 people waiting in the cold desert dawn. Marcus Thornton's trailer was dark and silent. At 5:30 a.m., dark. At 6 o'clock a.m., still dark. At 6:30 a.m., the AD knocked. No answer. He knocked louder. Nothing. At 6:45 a.m., he knocked hard enough to rattle the door. Still no response. Clint stood up from his director's chair. The entire crew watched as he walked across the set toward Thornton's trailer. This was unprecedented. Clint always directed from his chair, quietly confident, letting his ADs handle actor issues. Him walking across the set personally meant something significant was about to happen. Clint reached Thornton's trailer and knocked 3 times. Hard, sharp, authoritative knocks that echoed across the silent desert location. After a long moment, Thornton opened the door. He was in his bathrobe again, holding that same ceramic mug of tea, his face showing annoyance at the interruption rather than embarrassment at being late. "We're ready for you," Clint said quietly. "I'm preparing," Thornton replied, his tone suggesting Clint should understand this by now. "This is my biggest scene. I need to access very deep emotional territory. I'm doing sense memory work, connecting to personal traumas that will fuel the performance. That process can't be scheduled. It happens when it happens. Real artists understand this." "What time was your call?" Clint asked, his voice still quiet but carrying an edge now. "Call times are administrative conveniences," Thornton said, launching into what was clearly a prepared speech. "Real acting, serious method work, requires going to emotional places that can't be dictated by a production schedule. I'm not some hack who shows up and pretend to you. I'm creating something authentic, something that comes from genuine pain and genuine truth. That requires time and space that—" "What time?" Clint interrupted. "Was your call?" Thornton blinked, thrown off his prepared speech about artistic integrity. 5:30, but that's not the point. The point is that art doesn't conform to— "It's 7 a.m., Clint said, each word deliberate and final. "You're an hour and a half late. 3rd day in a row. 120 people have been waiting for you. People who got here on time despite having the same early call you did. Background actors who've been in costume since 4:30. Crew members who drove 90 minutes in the dark to be ready for your scene. Great art requires sacrifice," Thornton said, recovering his confidence. "Those people are being paid to wait, and that's literally what they're being paid for. My job is to create something transcendent, something that will last long after this production wraps. You of all people should understand that artistic integrity can't be compromised for—" "You're done," Clint said, cutting through the speech like a knife through paper. "Pack your things." Thornton stopped mid-sentence, his mouth literally hanging open. "What? Pack your things," Clint repeated, his voice that same quiet rasp that had become iconic in westerns. "You're fired. There's a production van waiting to take you back to Los Angeles. You have 1 hour. The words hung in the desert air like smoke. 120 crew members had gone completely silent, watching this unfold. Thornton laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "You can't fire me. We're in the middle of production. You need me for this scene. You need me for 6 more scenes. I'm integral to this film." "No," Clint said simply, seriously. We need a professional actor who respects other people's time and understands that filmmaking is collaborative. That's not you. Pack your things." "This is insane," Thornton said, his voice rising now with genuine panic replacing arrogance. "I'm giving you the performance of a lifetime here. I'm bringing method techniques you've never seen. You can't fire someone for taking their craft seriously." "I'm not firing you for taking craft seriously," Clint said, his voice still that deadly quiet. "I'm firing you for being late 3 days in a row, for showing zero respect for 120 professionals who've been waiting for you while you drank tea in your bathrobe, and for confusing self-indulgence with dedication." "My process," Thornton started. "Your process," Clint interrupted, "involves being on set when you're supposed to be on set. If you can't do that basic professional requirement, you can't work here. 1 hour. Pack your things." Thornton looked around at the crew, perhaps expecting someone to defend him, to tell Clint he was being unreasonable. He found 120 faces staring back at him with zero sympathy. People who'd been up since 3:30 a.m., people who'd driven hours in the dark, people who'd been standing ready for over an hour and a half while Thornton meditated in his trailer. "You're making a huge mistake," Thornton said to Clint, his voice shaking now. "I'm the best actor you'll ever work with. You're letting your ego destroy what could have been." "1 hour," Clint said, cutting him off. Then he turned and walked back to his director's chair without another word. Thornton stood in his trailer doorway for another moment, apparently waiting for Clint to change his mind or for someone to intervene. Neither happened. Finally, he went back inside and slammed the door hard enough to shake the entire trailer. Clint sat back in his director's chair and turned to his first AD. "Call Jonathan Reed. He screen tested for this role. See if he can be here by Monday. Reschedule all of Thornton's scenes for next week." Then he addressed the crew through a megaphone, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. "We're moving to scene 31. Let's not waste the morning." The crew erupted into activity, reorganizing for a completely different scene, grateful to finally be working instead of waiting. Several crew members were smiling. A few were trying not to laugh. The relief was palpable. Within 45 minutes, Marcus Thornton emerged from his trailer carrying 2 bags, his face a mixture of fury and disbelief. A production van was indeed waiting. He climbed in without speaking to anyone and left, still apparently believing this was all a terrible mistake that would be corrected. Clint didn't watch him go. He was already focused on the next shot. But what Thornton didn't know was that Clint had been making phone calls for 2 days, and what happened next wouldn't happen on set. It would happen throughout Hollywood over the following 48 hours. Within 3 hours of Thornton leaving the set, the story was already spreading through Hollywood. By sunset, it was in group chats, email chains, industry circles. By the next morning, it was in Variety and The Hollywood Reporter. But the story that spread wasn't just actor fired for being late. The story was much more detailed because crew members who'd witnessed everything were talking. They described Thornton's 3 days of deliberate delays, his dismissive attitude toward crew time, his lectures about real acting, his bathrobe and tea while 120 people waited. Thornton's agent tried to spin it as creative differences or scheduling conflicts, but too many people had witnessed what actually happened. The truth came out quickly and spread faster. And then the phone calls Clint had made started having their effect. On Monday morning, Thornton's agent called him with bad news. The indie film he'd been attached to had suddenly gone with another actor. Creative reasons, they said, but the timing was suspicious. On Tuesday, Bowen's, a pilot he'd been auditioning for, informed his agent they'd gone in a different direction. On Wednesday, a supporting role in a major studio film that his agent had called a lock suddenly went to someone else. By Friday, less than a week after being fired, Thornton's agent was getting calls from casting directors asking pointed questions about his professionalism and reliability. Studios were putting him on unofficial difficult actor lists. Directors who'd been interested suddenly weren't returning calls. What Thornton didn't understand was that Clint Eastwood wasn't just a director or an actor. He was an institution. He'd been in Hollywood for 50 years. He'd directed 30-plus films. He'd worked with every major studio. He knew every significant producer, executive, and director in the industry. When Clint made those phone calls, when he quietly mentioned that an actor had disrupted his production, showed contempt for crew members, and hid behind artistic process as an excuse for unprofessionalism, people listened. Not because Clint demanded they blackball Thornton. He didn't. He simply shared what happened, matter-of-factly, the same way he'd fired Thornton. No anger, no vindictiveness, just facts. Thought you should know what to expect if you're considering working with him. But in Hollywood, information like that spreads. Producers talk to other producers, casting directors compare notes, agents warn their clients about difficult actors who cause production delays and budget overruns. Within 2 months, Marcus Thornton's promising career had stalled completely. The roles stopped coming. The auditions dried up. His agent dropped him, explaining that he'd become too difficult to represent given his reputation. Thornton tried to fight back. He gave an interview to an industry blog explaining his side, talking about artistic integrity and how commercial Hollywood didn't understand real method acting. The interview made things worse. It confirmed everything people had heard about him. Arrogant, self-important, unwilling to take responsibility for his behavior. Within 6 months, Thornton was doing regional theater in Seattle. Within a year, he'd left acting entirely and was teaching drama at a community college in Oregon. The promising film career that seemed inevitable after his acclaimed independent film had been completely destroyed by 3 late arrivals and 1 conversation with Clint Eastwood. Meanwhile, Jonathan Reed, the actor Clint hired to replace Thornton, showed up 20 minutes early every single day. He knew his lines perfectly. He took direction without ego. He collaborated with other actors professionally, and he delivered an excellent performance that contributed to the film's critical and commercial success. Flags of Our Fathers went on to be nominated for multiple awards. Clint's reputation as a director who ran professional, efficient productions was reinforced. The film came in on budget and slightly ahead of schedule. Marcus Thornton became a cautionary tale, remembered when he's remembered at all as the method actor who thought he was too important to show up on time and got fired by Clint Eastwood. Years later, at a directing seminar, Clint was asked about the incident. His response was characteristically brief. "Film sets require discipline," Clint said, his voice that same quiet rasp. "Not because I'm authoritarian, but because hundreds of people coordinate complex work. When one person decides their process is more important than everyone else's time, they're not an artist. They're just selfish." But the crew members who were there tell a more detailed story. They talk about the 3 days of watching Thornton's arrogance build, watching Clint's patience hold, watching the inevitable confrontation approach like a storm you could see coming from miles away. They talk about how Clint never raised his voice, how he delivered the firing with the same calm he brought to every directing decision, how it wasn't dramatic or theatrical. It was simple and final. Pack your things, 1 hour. The incident became legendary not because it was loud, but because it was quiet. Clint simply drew a line. Professionalism matters. Talent doesn't excuse disrespect. Your artistic process doesn't give you the right to waste 120 people's time. To this day, "my artistic process can't be rushed" is a phrase you don't want to use on a film set anywhere in Hollywood. And showing up late 3 days in a row while everyone else is ready is a career mistake you only get to make once. The lesson Clint taught that morning in the Wyoming desert became a masterclass studied in film schools, discussed in production meetings, referenced by directors dealing with difficult actors. Not because Clint sought revenge or made a public spectacle, but because he did what needed to be done professionally, efficiently, and with the same quiet authority he brought to everything. If this story of professionalism and accountability moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that genius doesn't excuse bad behavior, and real artists respect the people they work with. Have you ever worked with someone who confused ego with excellence? Share your story in the comments.